Hello, everyone. This is your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist, Patty Wilson. Patty, what up?
It's a busy time of year. It's spring going into summer, so busy girl. But other than that, I've been busy doing a lot of research, and that's the stuff I wanted to chat with y'all about tonight.
Excellent. So what I would like to do at this point is say, if you're new with us, thank you for joining. If you are an old hat, if you're returning, thank you for coming back. And I've noticed, not that I really ruminate over the metrics or anything, but our subscriber rate on YouTube and Rumble have both been going up steadily. I mean, we're certainly not going to have those silver plaques behind us anytime soon, but it's good to know that we're reaching people and that we are providing entertainment information for them that they would otherwise not have. So I want to thank everybody for that.
Yes.
Everything is going to be down below in the description. And let me pause for a moment here and make sure I got everything. Here's something for the blooper reel. I think that's about all I have to say.
Okay.
I mean, have I missed anything?
I don't think so.
I'm mentally exhausted. I really am. So I may not be all there. So, all right, with that, what is our topic for tonight?
So I don't necessarily have a topic exactly, and I apologize if people think that they're going to hear ghost stories or something. And I toyed with that, but I have been spending many months now and researching not just the Watchers, but the fall from heaven and the war in heaven, and how all of this relates to us and humanity, because it's not a disconnected thing. And I want people to understand that. So there are three groups of beings. We're going to say the angels and the jinn, but the jinn are not part of this particular story, but I did want to at least acknowledge them. And this is the history of what happened between humanity and angels, and subsequently what happened. So what I have come to learn over the research that I've been doing is that the seraphim, and Lucifer was a seraphim. He was the leader of the seraphim. They are beings that are described in the Bible as having four faces. They have a ram's head, they have a bull's head, they have a lion's head, and a human face. And so you can definitely look them up and see what they look like. Now, these beings are animalistic in a great lot of ways, not just the head, but they have a kind of combination animal-human hybrid body shape. That may not sound like it means a whole lot, except that they are the ones who fomented the rebellion in heaven. And they are the leaders. There were at least 7 leaders who were seraphim. Obviously, the head of all of that was Lucifer. But there was another leader, Azazel. And Azazel was one of the leading seraphim, and he was one of those who truly believed that they could take on God and win. We know him under many names today because of what he did. Every culture has a list of demigods or of little g gods that come from ancient times, and they are part of this story, and they will come from these seraphim and then the 200 Watchers. So from what I understand, the seraphim foment this uprising in heaven, and the Watchers are already on earth. Now, I'm not sure if they were seraphim, if they were cherubs, or what they were doing. And in heaven, the seraphim were supposed to be guardians of the throne of God. So think about what that means. And they foment this rebellion, and fully 1/3 of the angels fall to earth, or fall from grace, at least. And Azazel, he comes down here and he talks to the Watchers. And he is the reason that the Watchers decided to take on human brides. They wanted as I said in a past podcast, to inherit the earth. But they also wanted something else from us. They wanted our souls. It is something that only we have. So they wanted their offspring to have that spark or soul. And from these liaisons come the Nephilim. And these Nephilim were described in the Bible, in the book of Jasher, and in the book of Enoch as large men, tall, heavy built, strong men, 12 to 18 feet tall. They were giants. And they were considered men of renown. And from this liaison, the Watchers had one thing to offer, and that is the arcane knowledge. Their actions are what built the whole idea of satanic worship and magic and ritual and sex magic and all of that. None of that existed prior. They understood that there were energy forces and frequencies involved with all of these things, and that if you pull the frequencies low, you can go into the dark side. If your frequencies go high, you move to a lighter side. Now, to that end, in case I sound like I'm insane already, and I get that that may sound that way, we now know with fairly good certainty that what Nikola Tesla was talking about when he said that he had seen heaven, and that he had seen another world, was that he understood that there are frequencies that open doors to other dimensions within this dimension. So there's dimensions inside of dimensions. And that's where these gateways and what have you come in. And that is how they travel, not from outer space, not from other planets, but from other dimensions within this realm. And they come and they go. And by these beings wanted and still want to this day to take over this planet. So what happens is the flood, and the Nephilim are drowned, as are many, I mean, almost all the humanity dies according to this. And the reason for that is because they were tainted with Nephilim or angelic blood. So they weren't pure human anymore. Noah's family was. But here's the part that one of the parts that nobody talks about. How could both things be real? There's Nephilim today, and all the Nephilim died. What happened was, after the flood, some of these beings, these angelic beings, these seraphim, returned to earth and began to lay with women. And from that, so if you look in the Bible, and if you look in the book of Jasher, and which is a book that is not in the Bible but is referred to in the Bible, there are at least 2 places in the Bible where they reference to the book of Jasher. And if you look at the book of Enoch, you'll find that Azazel is depicted as the goat, or the goat man. So he gave birth to the offspring that are satyrs. And satyrs were real beings. They were an amalgam of human and seraphim, Azazel's offspring. Others would give birth to other beings that were either ram-like or bull-like or chameleon-like in some way, meaning that they could shift shape. Now, all of the Nephilim who died in the flood, they had no soul. They couldn't leave the earth, so they walked the earth as demons. The demons aren't fallen angels. So,
so God, by creating the flood, created the demons
as a byproduct.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have anywhere to go. They're not human. They're not angelic. And so when the corporal body dies, all that's left is the spirit, but it's not able to cross over because it's not a human spirit, which is a spark of God's own essence. And so there's not enough of it there to do that. So yeah, in a way. And then the argument's going to be, well, how wouldn't God have known that? And I suspect that God would have known that. I can't speak for God. I would never assume that, but I think he knew that all of this was going to come, but he also still gave us all free will. And the essence of free will is not interfering with something when you don't like the outcome. So he allowed this to happen, and humanity has a choice to make throughout all of the epochs of time, including today. And then add to that the fact that there are literally demigods and small g gods that have been all over this whole planet, and the history has been suppressed of these beings. So there's a place called Tartania, which would have been an island, which was California, and large parcels of land all the way to Russia, some people would say. And this particular demigod actually came from a liaison with Nimrod, who was a great-great-grandson of Noah, and an entity that allowed him to change. If you read the story of Nimrod in the Bible, you come across the fact that Nimrod had a bed that was like 10 foot long and what have you, that his family line is suddenly infused. So my best guess is probably his parents, one of his parents was a Nephilim or a Watcher. And from that, he was born, and he gave birth, him and his, whatever he was with, gave birth to these other beings that took over. Now, you may say that's crazy. I've never heard of any such thing. Go and look at the seal for the state of California. There's a being there with like a halo around its head. That's Tartaria. That's her name. And they talk about it. There's a lot of research there if you look into it for this. In fact, it was actually, the place called Tartaria was actually in the Encyclopedia Britannicas in the before the turn of the 20th century.
And for our younger audience, encyclopedias were these books or a series of books that you put on a shelf and you used for reference before the internet.
Yes, and this Encyclopedia Britannicas were highly thought of. They were well researched, well documented.
Oh yes.
There are maps showing it in the 1700s. There's like 500 maps in the 1700s drawn of western part of this country. How they did this is like sailors that would, wander in, and explorers and what have you. And in about 200 of them, Tartaria exists as a place.
Interesting.
So I've given a lot of meat right now, so I'll let you do a little talking, ask some questions, and then we'll move forward again.
Well, I told you my brain is mush today. I mean, it's just been a long day, so I don't even know if I have any questions other than, well, I mean, thinking back now, the only time I ever heard of Nimrod previously was when my dad was alive. When he was younger, he was a big CB nut, CB radio nut. And again, look it up in the encyclopedia if you don't know what Citizens Band Radio was, or look it up, Google that one if you're the younger generation. And everybody had a handle, and his handle was Nimrod, being the mighty hunter. I mean, that's what that Nimrod was known for, at least in the readings that I had done or had heard of from the Bible.
Right.
So that's interesting how you go from being potentially a child of a Nephilim to being a mighty hunter, but maybe that entered into it someplace. But
yeah, so just for, you can leave this in or not, but just so that our listeners know, I threw a lot of stuff at you, and you are never told what's going to happen. So you're getting that first response that other people are having too.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here's a list of information. Now tell me what you think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this whole time I haven't really. There are times, whenever you're telling stories and things, I'm formulating questions and I'm formulating opinions and things like that. But this time I was just listening to your stories and being enthralled. I mean, not stories. I mean, this is actual, written history. So, so I can't say as I have any thoughts right now. I mean,
Okay. So why is this important to us? Because these old demigods or gods have never left this planet. They've been pushed aside throughout time by the religions of today. But as those religions are starting to recede, there are many biblical scholars who are saying they're coming back. They're stepping out of the shadows and they're trying to control us. And the reason they're trying to tear us apart and control us is because they want this planet and they need our souls. They need our souls to continue to exist. They think that if they that was the problem with the Nephilim previously. They didn't have a soul. And now they are trying to steal human souls or take human souls or convince people to give up their souls.
And I can't remember exactly the caller that Art Bell talked to. But Art Bell did talk to somebody, and my brain's kind of fuzzy today, but he did talk to somebody who said that aliens are actually interdimensional beings or gods, demigods, that their primary task was to harvest our souls.
Yep. And I truly have become to believe it.
I can't remember the person's name. And before I edit this, I will probably go back and look and see who that was. And, I'll put the name down below if I remember right, or even put a link in the description. But I can't remember the name of the person. Because I thought the person, he had more than one conversation with them. And then they just kind of disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's been people throughout history and throughout time who have recognized and known this. And when they speak out, they get silenced because people don't want to hear that. What you're talking about, maybe the soul isn't even real, but if it is real, it's mine. And I don't understand what that would be all about. But I want you to think closely about some things, about what causes a person to be able to do the things that some people do. What makes a person willing to not just traffic children, but to kill them? What makes people, I know you need to understand that all these demigods from Azazel on out demanded child sacrifice. Tartania, every Friday night a male child had to be sacrificed to her when she ruled. They're bringing back the things that they found pleasing to them. And there's a reason they find them pleasing to them, because our essence is in our blood. And by spilling our blood, they get that soul, or they think they're going to get that soul. It's a sacrifice paying homage to them. And nothing ever changes. There's a lot of history that people don't realize. There's arguments being made now based upon paintings and written texts that Christ didn't live 2,000 years ago, that he lived closer to a little over 1,000 years ago, that this stuff has all been twisted around by specific powers that be, and by those I have to say, no offense meant, the Catholic Church was one of them. There were other leaders that were interested in twisting this because they don't want the truth out there, because in truth is power. And history's being rewritten at rapid rates. Like, people have to understand that the internet is the best tool ever to rewrite history. You can pull an old Encyclopedia Britannica off a shelf that was written in 1898 or in 1920 or whatever, and what it says is what it says. But you can go onto the internet and edit everything and twist it around every single day.
And now we have to worry about AI doing it instead of people.
Yes. And so they wanted people to know this is where I've been pouring my research into. And there is so much more to tell you in this story. So these beings are building, I don't want to, chimeras and robots, if you will. I think this is part of like the Men in Black, that kind of thing, that they are interacting with humans. But in order for them to truly be able to function, they require souls.
Okay, then with all of this bad news, okay, and I can't think of any other way to put it. What's our recourse?
Well, yeah, I honestly don't think, I think that knowledge, the knowledge of what's happening and what's been happening, isn't bad news. It's, I want you to wake up. And what the recourse is that we know there is research that tells us that if we gather together and focus on positive things, whether it's through what you want to call prayer or meditation or just focusing on it, we can change things. These beings are energy beings. And when we change the frequency of our energy, we can change their ability to work. And to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, we know that frequencies can pick up rocks, heavy things, and move them. There's very little doubt of that. Tesla kind of went through that whole process and showed that to the world, that you can transfer free electricity. Can you imagine that? Through the planet? And it would just pop up where it needed to on a grid work, and it would be absolutely free. It's there already. It's just harnessing what's already in the earth. We know that frequencies can make you ill, can kill cancer, can do all kinds of things, positive and negative. And understanding those frequencies and how to use them to your benefit is also a positive, because every religious text in the world that I've ever come across, and I have to tell you, I'm not an expert, so maybe I missed somebody, but every one that I've come across tells you in some fashion, when people go together and they focus on something positive, it fixes it. There's an author, I will get her name so that you can check out her book. She wrote a book about how she and a group of people, she's a scientist, she and a group of people, they began focusing on the crime in certain cities that were really, really heavy crime cities, okay? And and she starts watching the crime stats. After a couple weeks, the crime stats start going down and going down and going down. And when they stopped, they shot right back up. She chronicles all of this and more in her book. So our thoughts, our focus, our energy has to be on something positive. I honestly believe one of the reasons we've been going through what we're going through is because they need to lower our frequencies. Because we're frightened, we're angry, we're frustrated, defeated, and those things lower your frequency. And it's controllable for them that way, but not when you're focusing on positives. And I know it's easy to say and hard to do. I mean, I have my days, we all do. But it's something that I wanted to bring up, and it's totally different than anything I ever talk about. And it's just a one-off. I probably won't do this again unless I get a lot of response that people are interested in learning more about it. But there are things that you can control just by that. The Bible says where two or more are gathered together in my name. And if you go to almost every ancient religious text, they acknowledge that if two or more people gather together, something and focus on something positive will happen. There's studies, to give you a really simplistic one. There are studies where people were asked to pray for two patients, both in intensive care. Both looks like they're dying. And they don't know anything about them. They don't know who they are. They just know this is Fred and this is Ethel. And Fred and Ethel are both struggling with death at this moment. If Fred gets the focus, Fred is much more inclined to survive than Ethel. And if you then switch the focus from Fred to Ethel, Fred will start to decline and Ethel will start to get better. It's the same with plants. You can pray over plants and they'll grow like crazy, or talking to plants, because you're giving frequencies, energy. Everything on this planet works from frequencies and energy. We vibrate at 7.83 hertz. Everything on this planet vibrates. And there are good vibrations and there are vibrations that will cause you to get sick, to die. They are talking about something called med beds, which are beds that read the frequency. They're working on them. There are places that say they may even have them now. And they can actually tune a frequency to go through your body as you're laying on this bed to address your physical health and issue without regular medication, using frequencies to heal you.
Interesting. The only thing that I heard in that regard, and for people with diabetic neuropathy, that there is a device, and I again can't remember the name of the company or the name of the device, that basically would use the 7.83 hertz frequency to regenerate the nerves in the parts of the body affected by neuropathy.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Did you know that they changed the frequency of music by one? Do you know that one talking about?
Yeah, where A, instead of being 440 hertz, it was what did it? It was like 436 or something like it. It was a small change, but the A became 440.
Right, and they said it was because it was easier to deal with the music, and reproduce it. But that makes no sense because it's not much of a change. But what it does do is the 440 was a positive, uplifting frequency. 436 isn't. So you can go, and I know it sells on the MBPMB, but I'm telling you, there are scientists looking into this right now. And think about it in your own self. If you start listening to music and you're listening to something depressing and sad, you feel more depressed and sad. It literally impacts your emotions. If you're listening to something that is happy or peaceful or beautiful, it makes you feel better. And there are so many, there actually are channels you can go to on YouTube where they'll tell you the frequencies and what they do. So like our healing frequencies are 40 hertz, 174 hertz, 285 hertz, 396, 417, 432. You can tune to these things and you can go to these channels and find them. And I could go on and on, but those are some of the frequencies that'll heal. And they're now using those hertz frequencies to start to heal people.
In the natural world?
Yes, in our world.
Well, no, in the natural, cats have been purring at a specific frequency to heal themselves and to some degree.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's and not only do they do that, but do you know that cats purr? I never knew this until recently. Cats purr all the time, but they purr so low that you can't hear them. They will adjust and purr loud enough for us to hear them at a frequency if they think we need healing, that'll make us feel better.
I don't doubt that.
So I mean, and if you think that I'm the only person talking about it, well, let me tell you, there are scientists around the world looking into how to use this better. There are places that are using it now, like you go in and you have cancer or something, they'll look at frequencies that impact your cancer and they'll find one that works, and then they play that for you as a treatment, and they can watch the tumors get smaller. But that is what they're looking at, and they took this from the idea of Tesla about how frequencies can do things.
Well, look at his earthquake machine.
Exactly.
Simple, just a rhythmic tapping. Eventually could, at a specific frequency, could bring down an entire building. Yeah, it's just that's fascinating to me. Although, and who hasn't been cruising YouTube and found videos about the ancients being able to use sound to cut rock, cut perfect circles through rocks, all kinds of things that the knowledge that's not available to us nowadays. Either that or it's been suppressed so that we don't have it. So
I want to give you one site. So this is Market Business News, and this was in 2022, and they're writing everything you need to know about the Tesla MedBed. And it says, what is Tesla MedBed? Technology is considered the future of healthcare that helps to ensure your overall health condition by generating a field of restorative life force energy frequency MedBed offers a natural, powerful solution to promote cellular self-repair. The FDA has registered the Tesla MedBed generators as effective, safe, and natural. However, these MedBeds are not electrical medical beds, and it is based on quantum technology that heals your body using artificial intelligence. They have 3 types: holistic MedBeds, regenerative MedBeds, and rejuvenation MedBeds. And then it goes into how they work. This is not sci-fi. This is a business website talking about this coming technology. Nearly hundreds of diseases and conditions are mapped in a database including 10,000 unique frequency patterns. To analyze your scan patterns, multiple algorithms are created, correlated with the existing database, and they determine the cause of the illness, and finally, they deliver appropriate treatment. Now, our medicine today is treating the symptom of your illness, not the cause.
Well, of course, because a patient cured is a customer lost.
Exactly. For instance, patients with cancer always have low energy cells of less than 15 millivolts. MedBed produces Tesla waves that could significantly increase the energy potential of the body cells by up to 70 millivolts. This increase in energy potential is believed to heal cancer and prevent its dissemination to other regions of the body. And it goes on and it tells you all these other things that these MedBeds they believe are going to be able to do. They're working on that. The trials and what have you are being held now. They use only natural frequencies harnessed from life force, and they improve energy and cellular function, regenerate the body, and help reverse aging, which is damage. Now, what does that mean? Why is that important to what I started out talking about? Because you may think, oh my gosh, she's just digressed. She's gone right off the chart. But I didn't. Everything is frequency. These angels, these demonic entities, these Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, they're moving at different frequencies than us. So we don't always see them unless they let us. But they're there. So it's very much, think of it this way. Think of it like they tell you dogs only see in black and white. Does that mean color doesn't exist? Of course not. They just can't see it.
You got me thinking now of the movie, there's another John Carpenter movie with Roddy Piper.
Oh, I know the movie you're talking about where he could see the demonic entities.
Well, the aliens, but he could see them with a specific pair of glasses.
Yeah.
They Live, I think that was the name of it.
I think it is, yeah.
And it would be interesting if there were, or if there could be made a, for the lack of a better term, a prism, because as it is, a prism takes white light and separates it into individual wavelengths or frequencies of light. So why couldn't there be something to allow us to see frequencies that we normally wouldn't be able to see? I would think that that's possible.
I would think so too. I want to talk, trying to remember what her name was. Hildegard. Let me look her up here. Bear with me, guys. Her last name went right out of my head.
There's a lot of that going around today.
I know. A lot of
at least on this side of the camera. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in the 1400s, I believe it was, there was a young woman by the name of Hildegard von Bingen, or of Bingen, depending on who you are looking at her, but Hildegard is her name. So the story of Hildegard in the nutshell is that Hildegard was given to the Catholic Church as a child, small infant. She was raised by nuns. And at the age of about 12 or 13, she began to hear celestial music. And she would sing it for the priests, and they would write the songs down. And then they had never heard music like this before. And she said it was the angels' music. There's a lot more to who she was. She takes on the entire Catholic Church at one point in her life. She's a really interesting character if you're interested in historical figures. And we know virtually nothing of her because she's been squelched because she did take on the Catholic Church. But about 40 years ago, some of her music resurfaced and it's played. You can pull it up on YouTube. It's the most angelic music on the planet I've ever heard. I've used it. in homes where I'm working where there's a lot of negative stuff going on. I've had my own personal experiences with it. I played it in my home one night when all three of my sons were there, but they were in different places. And one by one, they kept coming out. Now, at the time, my oldest was into Marilyn Manson. And he comes out and he's listening to this angelic music. And he goes, Mom, what is that? And I tell him basically what I just told everybody. And he goes, I don't know. Ain't my stuff, but it's pretty darn cool. You should just keep that playing all the time. Makes you feel good. A little bit later, the middle boy comes wandering out and he's like, Mom, what is that? And I tell him again, tell him that one. And he's like, it kind of makes your heart light. I like that. We should play that more often here. And then the youngest comes out a little bit later when he gets home and same thing. Not his cup of tea. He's a Billy Joel fan, but, man, that's really pretty, Mom. That makes me feel good inside. We know that angelic music, which is, angel frequencies, if you will, that there are frequencies that the angels particularly use or that they vibrate at, which are different than ours. That these frequencies are sent and they're used for divine guidance, for healing, and for music. And they also will generate light, which very well may be why people talk about a burst of light when they see angelic beings.
Yeah, me, I think more, I do think in a science way in a lot of aspects. So that's got me thinking. So I'll have to formulate something before I come up with a response. It may take me a while.
So no, and I just wanted people to hear where I'm at. So these old gods, these demonic entities that couldn't walk away because they were Nephilim and they don't have the ability. They're angry. They're frustrated. They want to take over. They had taken over at one point. Some of the, so the satyrs were worshipped, as was Azazel, and he was, he was Baal in one culture. In another culture, he carries a different name. He's actually known as the God of 1,000 names because he appears in all the world in different cultures, and they just give him a slightly different name. But there are telltale signs for him and a couple of the others that they are the same being. They require the same things, the same forms of worship. They are described very much the same way, but just the language is different. So those people call him something slightly different, but they're there. And what we're going through right now is them trying to rise again. And I wish I could tell you, you could target them in 1,000 other ways, but target them with joy. Target them with living your best life. Listening to the music. I will tell you, Hildegard von Bingen, her music's gorgeous. I highly recommend it as something to ease you. When I had patients and clients with anxiety that I was working with at my one facility, I was allowed to play the music very softly in the background. It was interesting to me how their mood would lift in about 10 minutes after they sat down. And it was barely audible, absolutely barely audible. But yet they would be like, I don't know, but I always feel better when I'm in this room with you, Patty. And we need to understand we're not just flesh and blood. We are more than that. We've always been more than that. We get so bogged down in the physical world, but we need to understand we're in a battle that goes on different levels. Yeah, physically there's a battle going on for the soul and the minds of the humanity, but also spiritually there is. And these old gods from the ancient times, they're coming back and they're trying very hard to set up new dynasties. And we have to be careful to not let that happen. And you do that by keeping your joy and telling the truth, looking into this. I've barely scratched the surface here tonight. I could have taken you on a 12-hour journey, but I will spare you all because I like you. I
That would
just wanted
take
to
me
put our
forever to edit.
Yeah. I know, honey. But the point I'm making is that we don't have the faintest clue about our own history. We have been manipulated for a long time, like Tartaria. There's people will tell you one thing, people will tell you another. Some will say, well, it's all crazy and it doesn't make any sense. But explain the maps, explain the history, explain, why some of these things exist. And there are just so many of these stories, and they're not, they're not just stories. There's now documentation coming out. There's things coming out to talk about that are like, these are proof. Like this 150, 200 years ago, there were 200 maps made. 250 years ago, there were maps made. 300 years ago, there were maps made that Tartaria was on. Are they all wrong? None of them saw it? They're all exaggerated? Something's going on. I don't have all the answers either. I'm going to continue to look into this stuff. And I'm going to, down in the bottom in the description, I will put the name of the author with the book on the frequencies where she was able to positively impact crime rates. So you can see that there is scientific evidence that this happens. There are scientists now coming out saying that science can prove now that the soul is real, that it exists. And they're talking about it. We need to understand that our most important possession is something that's being highly sought after. And we need to guard it and protect it because we don't understand it yet. With that, I will say good evening. I hope everybody enjoyed this little journey down a weird little rabbit hole of mine. And let us know what you think, because I think it's really important that we start talking about the truth, about things like the frequencies and how they impact us, and why did they change our musical frequencies? Why are they doing the things that they're doing, and what gets this right? And who are these beings that are trying to take back over? And if you think I'm alone with it, well, go into anywhere in the Christian community. There's a huge component of those. Go into other religious communities, go into even communities of satanic people and stuff like that in witchcraft. They'll tell you the same stories from their side. I mean, the Baphomet, which is the goat god, guess who he is? Azazel. He exists in almost every religion and culture that I've ever come across, along with others. And consistently, the same ones creating the same rituals over and over again. If you're interested in more, let us know, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And I would like to say a special thank you to a podcast called Midnight Rides. I enjoy it immensely. It is a religious podcast, but the two gentlemen who host it are extremely knowledgeable, and I have learned a great deal and then jumped off from what I've learned there to go on and do a lot more research. And I just wanted to make sure that I gave them a nod, because that's where I started my journey down the rabbit hole.
All right. Well, I have just one question.
Yes.
I normally have no trouble coming up with a title for an episode, but you got me on this one.
Oh my. A conversation about gods. Little g.
All right. Fair enough. I normally
Maybe.
use sentence case, but in this case, I won't. In this case, I won't case that.
Please.
Okay.
But anyhow, maybe, I mean, that's my suggestion. I mean, if you change it, you think you find something that's better, I'm not offended. As you well know, I don't often get offended about anything. I really don't. I value other people's opinions. One of the nicest things I learned from being a writer is that you need to shut your mouth and let other people tell you stuff, because you learn a heck of a lot from it if you're willing to lay your ego down.
It's a good day when I learn something. Yeah, I've been on this planet a long time, and I still like to learn something every day. Even in my chosen vocation, I learn something new every day, which is nice.
Yeah. I find myself insatiably hungry for knowledge all the time. And whether, again, like, working in the field of psychiatry, I'm fascinated. I'm always a little saddened by the fact that there is research and papers and documentation for a lot of things that are actually very different from the treatments that we're giving. And I know those treatments are antiquated or subpar or what have you. And yet those are the treatments that are in play. And it's because I don't care what anybody will ever tell you. I will tell you this with great certainty in my heart, that doctors and scientists and people in those general fields are the most stuck, constipated people I've ever met. And I mean that like not physically, but like they
Yeah.
don't want to, they
Mhm.
don't want to grab onto anything new. There's a story about a doctor in France in the mid 1800s, and he noticed that there was 2 wards for pregnant women for delivery. There was Ward A and Ward B. And in Ward A, the death rate of the mothers was an infection rate was very, very low. But in Ward B, it was horrible, so high. And he began to look at this and think, what is different? You know, it's the same hospital, same doctors, same nurses, same care. Why? So he starts looking at everything that the doctors are doing in the day, and he realizes that between rounds on A ward and rounds on B ward, many of the doctors go down and they're doing the autopsies and they're doing all this sort of thing. And at the time, nobody knew about the germs and washing your hands. So he postulated if you washed your hands, you would have less infection. And he started to think, I wonder if they're carrying the diseases that killed these other people into Ward B. So he started talking to doctors and nurses and demanding that they wash their hands between patients, and particularly after having been in the autopsy rooms. And he noticed that it lowered dramatically, absolutely. And he had this data in his hands. And he started talking to other doctors, and he's like, we got to do this. Now, his doctors in his hospital believed him because they could see the evidence of it in the dropping rate of death in Ward B. But you know what happened? Go ahead.
I was going to say, you'd think that the doctors would also be dying at the same rate of the people in Ward B.
Necessarily, because they were healthy, but whenever you're like intimately handling a female when she's giving birth and your hands are dirty with this bacteria, you infect her. And so anyway, he starts trying to convince other doctors in France to do this. He ends up in a mental hospital dying by being beaten by a patient there. And he ends up being admitted as a crazy person because they drove him, like they made fun of him, they harassed him, they belittled him, they destroyed his career. They took everything from him rather than admit that they were wrong. And science is rife, and medicine is rife with those stories.
Yeah, you don't have to get me started on that one.
So, but the point I'm making is that maybe, just maybe, there's stuff out there that could help us that they've known about that they're not using because it's not conducive to whatever the times are today. And those are things that come down to frequency, and frequency goes back to God, and it goes back to the earth and how things were built. And it goes back to the age of the gods, the little gods, and all of that. And they use frequencies to open doors. That's what, when they talk about like these stargates, you hear them in movies and what have you, which is fictional. I get that. But they're talking about gates that open into other dimensions to let beings in and let beings out. It is postulated that what they're attempting to do today now is to open the stargate, if you will, on hell and let beings out.
Not a good idea.
I personally don't see why anybody would think it was, but apparently there are those who do. And if you want to look at something bizarre, go look at this opening ceremonies for CERN in Switzerland. It is the most bizarre thing you have ever seen in your life. They have ancient rituals, witchcraft, demigods, dancing. I mean, this is supposed to be a scientific endeavor, right?
Right.
Okay. Go look at the opening ceremonies. They have literally a Baphomet dancing. They have these weird witches and crazy things dancing all around, and Shiva's dance. It's like an hour-long thing, dancing in and out of the tunnels, dancing in front of people, floating up into the air. It's bizarre. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but I highly recommend looking at it. It's crazy. And you sit there and you watch it and you're like, what does this have to do with science?
What does the Large Hadron Collider have to do with science if it's meant to do something else? So, yeah.
So with that, I think I'll just say good night and wait to find out what the fallout is.
Sounds good. Okay. And you always get the last word, so good night.
Good night.
there's more for the blooper reel.
Okay. It's okay.
Oh, literally, my
So-
brain is mush.